It all started with another family camping trip. My brother Andy, my parents, my Aunt Laura, my Uncle Ben, and I always planned an annual camping trip to the nearby mountains. Every year we would hike a bit higher and walk a bit further. This year we went up about 10 miles and a half way around the mountain to a grassy flatland. It was pretty nice, quiet, and unmoved by the urban life. Just a few miles down the road. The only part I didn't like was that there was no actual bathroom. So if you needed some quiet time in the John, you needed to take a shovel and hope you don't pick up poison ivy. It was getting closer to sundown and the camp was all set up and the fire was crackling in the center. I had the greatest urge to take a piss. So I told my mother I was going into the trees for a moment. She told me not to go too far, and I nodded to show her I understood. Then I left. I walked into the collection of trees, moving just far enough to see the light. The last thing I wanted is one of my family members just peering behind a tree and causing another one of those awkward moments in life. Once I was on empty, I fixed my pants and planned my way back, but just as I was about to leave, something caught the corner of my eye. I turned my head and in the pond a few feet away, there was a girl washing her legs off. I was curious, so I walked over. She had pitch black, messy hair and those two pigtails. She didn't look much older than me, maybe 13 or 14. She wore a torn pleated uniform dress but no shoes. Her legs were covered in bruises and cuts. Hey! I watched her finishing wiping her legs off with the water and standing straight up. She slowly turned to me. Her black bangs were long and overgrown. My name is Reuben. I smiled at her. What's yours? A fog rolled in while she stood there silently. Then once I could barely see the trees behind her, I heard her whisper, Lulu. Lulu? Well, that's a cute name. So where are you staying? I looked around. It was almost impossible to see anything. Not only that, but the sun was starting to go down. I can take you, she muttered softly, taking my hand. Her skin was smooth, even with the bruises. Soft and plush-like, but so very cold. I was quiet for a moment, conflicted if I should go with her or not. I gave her a smile shortly after and agreed to follow her. We walked on a dirt path that was cluttered with dead leaves and fallen branches. At the time I was only concentrated on her, and not the fact that she was walking blindly into fog like it was an everyday task. The foggy forest dimmed as the sun descended. She managed to lead me to an old abandoned two-story home as the fog thickened even more. She and I sat on the porch to watch the darkness. Aren't you afraid, of living out here in the woods alone? I looked over at the quiet, shoeless Lulu. She hugged her bruised knees and kept her eyes hidden. Not really, even with the tall man, killers, and monsters on all fours. I am never scared. No one visits me anyway, she explained as quietly as she had spoken her name. I was surprised at her response. For a moment I thought her crazy. But then again, she had probably been here for quite some time. So, where are you from? A very faraway place. It's very dark there. I don't like the dark very much. Bad things happen there. She trembled for a moment, and then we sat in silence. Why do you cover your face? I asked her, feeling a chill from the cold air. I don't like people seeing my face. More eerie silence rolled in with the wind. Then I cleared my throat. When do you think the fog will let up? I will need to get back to camp before my parents get worried. I looked at her, and she stood up. Something felt strange about her suddenly. A sad demonic feeling overwhelmed me. "Are you hungry?" she asked, walking to the door, falling off its hinges. Yeah." I stood up as well, ready to follow her inside. She walked into the house and I followed. Inside was a very well kept bare home. There was barely any furniture left alone. Thus the windows were clean, the couch looked soft. Hell, there was even lights on in the kitchen area. I sat on the couch, which was nice and soft despite its seemingly aged upholstery. She entered the living space with an old chipped plate and a bowl of soup, and a shiny silver spoon. She sat on my lap and went to get me a napkin. Then she disappeared up some steps. I sat alone eating my soup. It was sweet, warm, and went down well. It had a deep red coloring with clear signs of vegetables floating about. I ate thinking of my parents. I had been out a long time, but we didn't walk that far. Shouldn't my parents be calling my name? I should be able to hear them from here. It was weird, ever since the fog rolled in. I dismissed my thoughts after my soup was done, and my eyes became drowsy. I set my plate, bowl, and spoon on the single table in the room, and lay on the couch. My only thought was about the girl who disappeared in the house as I drifted to sleep. I was woken in the darkness of the night by a loud scream from below. I shot up on the couch and looked around. There was nothing but the creaking boards and howling house. I listened for a few minutes to the eerie silence of the house. I looked over at the table when I returned to my position and noticed the dishes were gone. Lulu must have taken them. I closed my eyes, surrendering to the sleepiness. As I drifted back into my dreamscape, a loud thud came from below, and I shot up again. This time I stood certain this wasn't my imagination. What if Lulu was in danger? She seemed too frail to fight off anything that could have wandered in. I needed to make sure she was okay. The last thing I would want was seeing her seriously hurt, when I could have helped her. I then carefully maneuvered my way around the dimly lit home. I ran into a bathroom, a bedroom, a closet, and then the basement door. I touched the knob of the door and this eerie chill slowly ran its way down my spine. I was reluctant to open it, but thinking of Lulu, I forced myself to turn the knob and open the door. Behind the door there was a darkened stairwell. A strong cold foul wind came up the stairs. I coughed a few times from the unsuspecting smell, then took a few steps down. As I descended to the basement, the foul smell got stronger. My stomach began to churn and my eyes watered. It smelled like something was rotting in the basement. At the bottom I found a switch and flipped it. The basement was now fully illuminated. Or at least this part was. At the corner of the room there was another door covered in deep brown rust-like color. "Lulu!" I called out, looking around. There was no answer. I was starting to get worried. Where could she be? "Lulu!" I screamed louder, more anxious than before. I hurried over to the door in the corner of the room. I grabbed the handle and swung it open. "Lulu!" I stopped what I had seen. In that room made me lose everything I had eaten. There was an entire room with bodies, rotten, decaying bodies just laying there. I saw men, women, and a few people my age sprawled about the floor, even hanging. The one thing they all had in common was their faces. None of them had eyes. There were only black, empty sockets staring through me. I couldn't handle it. I backed away from the door and bumped into something. I slowly turned around and there stood Lulu, dressed arms and legs all covered in blood. I was horrified. I thought she was so sweet. I didn't think she could. I couldn't even fathom the situation. I was just wishing this was all a bad nightmare, that none of this was real. "You've seen too much," She looked up at me with her hair moving from her face to reveal nothing but smooth skin. She had no eyes, not even open sockets. Your face. I backed away from her even further, tripping over tools spread about on the floor. Her hand touched the smooth surface. My eyes. You can't see them right now. She flashed a small smile, as if she was embarrassed or even happy. But I have them. I was frozen, my heart thumping in my chest. I could barely move. Then she moved all the hair from her face, smearing the blood from her hands. See? The skin around the non-existent sockets started to tear open and bleed. She started to look sad, so hurt. After a moment, she had deep, empty sockets. Now that you've seen it, she reached out for me, and I smacked her hands away. Get away from me, you fucking freak! I shoved her out of the way and clumsily ran up the stairs. She followed. You've seen too much! I heard her voice echo behind me as I ran out of the house into the foggy woods. Give me your eyes! I looked back and saw her standing on the porch. I didn't stop until I tripped over a branch and fell down a small incline. I managed to break my arm on a rock, making me scream in agony, the bone clearly poking from a small spot on my arm. Within moments, she was sitting in my chest, her hands inches away from my face. I kicked and rolled until she was off, then made my way onto my feet. She kept yelling at me from my eyes, and I kept running, blood splurting from a small opening on my arm. Then that's when I noticed the pond. I had just met her at that pond, which means my parents weren't far away. I found the tree I pissed on, then the embers from the fire. I ran as hard as I could and stumbled onto camp. My family had jumped on my entrance. I was suddenly so dizzy and tired from running. I looked around and I saw my mother. She looked so worried. The sun's illuminated camp and the fog was gone. I relaxed for a moment, feeling safe, and I closed my eyes. I woke up in a hospital, my mother standing above my bed. I had a tube in my arm and a cast on the other. She leaned down to give me a kiss on my forehead. I'm so glad you're alright. You leave for 5 minutes to use the bathroom and you come back with a broken arm and cuts? Now how did you manage that? But 5 minutes? I slowly sat up. I was gone for 5 minutes? But the girl, the fog, the house, and the bodies. Honey, there were no houses at our campsite, no girls, and most certainly no fogs. I was at a standstill. I was in the fog. I saw the girl. She had touched my hand. She fed me. And those bodies. How? I had checked out of the hospital by the time it was 11 o'clock. I made my way home with my parents. A fog had rolled in, but that was normal for the night around here. I had set my alarm clock when I got to my bedroom and lay in my bed. I yawned and closed my eyes. I started fading out. The house was quiet. The image of the girl was clear in my mind. I took a deep breath when I heard her sob, "Give me your eyes." News headline: 7th gruesome suicide. Boy takes his own life by removing his own eyes and bleeding to death. Parents found him early this morning, lying on his bed deceased. His eyes, however, have not been found.